But our top story of the day highlights some of the biggest news of the Farnborough Air Show, and our air cargo editor, Eric Coolidge, is here to join us and break those down. Eric, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Anthony, how are you?
Doing well. How are you doing? Thanks for joining us this morning.
Anytime. Glad to be here. It's pretty warm out here in the Pacific Northwest. We just had 100 degrees the other day, so kind of joining in with the rest of the country, sweltering.
Yeah, unusual for that heat, and I'm actually talking about that and you guys later on in weather today, Eric. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about the Farnborough Air Show that was just recently held. It was an exciting time. We kind of previewed it about a week and a half ago, but now that it went on, what actually came out of the show that was really newsworthy?
Yeah, well, speaking of hot weather and heat, the Farnborough Air Show in outside of London, which is kind of one of the biggest shows for the industry. All the stakeholders gather, the manufacturers, suppliers, airlines, and other groups to talk about issues and see flying displays and aerial action, and then make deals. But that show went on. They had record heat in England. People had no air conditioning over there, so people were sweltering at that event. That apparently was 100 degrees, so that was kind of unusual. But this was the first air show of any size, really, since the pandemic. So people were chomping at the bit to see what would happen, and it was relatively quiet as far as huge number of orders compared to some other years in the past, but it was still quite significant. And a lot of the noise was made actually on the freighter side, and Boeing overall, trounced Airbus if you look at total orders between passenger and freighter jets. But at the end of the day, Airbus didn't really make that much of a play there. They already had in the first half of the year a large order book that was in excess of what Boeing had ordered, and then even the Monday after the show they got 40 orders from Condor Airlines for narrow body passenger jets. So you can't really look at the show by itself, but on the freighter side, which is what we're interested in, Boeing did really well. They got an interesting Cargolux. They're a very large all-cargo airline based out of Luxembourg. They had an unusual announcement in that they said, we're going to the new Boeing 777X, a cargo plane, which is still in development. That's going to be our replacement for our older 747-400 freighters. They have about 16 of those. But the announcement was weird. It didn't give a number. It didn't really say a commitment. It said it's our preferred solution. But when I questioned Cargolux, they said, yeah, when we start retiring these older planes in a few years, we're going to stick with Boeing and we're going to replace them with these large 777Xs. And that's significant because Boeing's trying to get new orders for this plane that just was introduced or launched in the market maybe in December timeframe. So Cargolux is the fifth airline to say they're going to buy these planes. And then we had an interesting, we had some interesting orders in the freighter conversion market. That most of the rest of them were in that area. Boeing had there's a company called Saltchuk Aviation, which probably no one's ever heard of, but it's basically the holding company for some container shipping lines, tropical shipping, and tote out of the Pacific Northwest and Puerto Rico. And both those companies do Jones Act shipping, to Alaska and Puerto Rico and places like that. But they also own three airlines: Aloha Air Cargo, Northern Air, and one company in Miami. And so they're getting some Boeing 767 freighters from Boeing. They're going to convert the older passenger planes to cargo jets. We have a bunch of leasing companies also getting down a level, the 737-800. Some leasing companies ordered a few of those. Georgia Airlines out of Tbilisi in the Caucasus ordered some 737-800s. And then we have what I'd like to see, what I thought was a really interesting deal. GOL, G-O-L, it's a Brazilian passenger airline. They are starting a freighter division for the first time. They're going to lease 6 737-800 converted freighters from Boeing, or from a leasing company that's buying them from Boeing. And they're going to start a freighter division for a company called Mercado Libre, which essentially is like the Amazon of Latin America. And they're basically starting a logistics, or have a logistics operation kind of like Amazon, and have a new airline basically. And so GOL is going to be one of a couple of carriers that flies on behalf of Mercado Libre, moving their packages around on a daily basis. So I thought that was really neat.
Eric, hitting on that last little point there about Mercado Libre, we've spoken with Noy Mahoney a whole bunch about how e-commerce has really taken off in Latin America, not only out of Mexico, but from Brazil all the way up through Central America as well. Do we see companies now starting to capitalize on that e-commerce surge by getting into the air freighter market and maybe thinking, you know what, it's going to be smart to preempt that e-commerce surge by getting our air cargo needs set up before it gets to the point where the airlines are playing catch up?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Latin America is growing in an e-commerce sense. I'm not sure how it compares to other continents, but it's the e-commerce market is growing very strong there, as it is around the world. A couple days ago, DHL said it's going to start a new dedicated flight from Miami to Sao Paulo, Brazil. For the first time, it primarily had been using commercial airline airlift to get packages or shipments down there. I don't know if that's specifically e-commerce related, but it is, they are parcel carriers, so a fair amount of their shipments probably are e-commerce along with other general cargo. So that was interesting. And then you've got Embraer, which is another smaller manufacturer than Boeing and Airbus. They make these smaller jets like the E190 and the E195, and they just started a passenger to freighter conversion program, and those planes could be sold around the world. In fact, Astral Aviation in Kenya, in Africa, is taking the first 2. But I assume that some airlines in Latin America will be interested in that already fly that plane. And that plane's interesting because it sits kind of between the 737s, which are a little larger, and some of the large turboprop planes that are coming on the market now.
And Eric, shifting gears here real quick, you recently put out a story around Cargojet and what's going on with some oversupplied inventories. What's been the latest with that?
Yeah, well, that was an interesting story, and kind of on that e-commerce path again. Cargojet's a big the largest cargo airline in Canada. They just put out their earnings, had a very good quarter, as all cargo airlines are doing. But it was interesting, reading between the lines of their earnings call, that they said, even though there's some signs of softening of the e-commerce market in Canada as far as total, dollars spent and just economic headwinds, they said they haven't seen that yet in their volumes. And what they said is what's happening is that, consumers are trading down or buying down a level in what they're buying. So instead of buying, a $150 pair of Nike sneakers or some other expensive products, now they're buying more basics, toothpaste and toothbrushes and just other staples and things. And so, but all those things need to move. People still want that convenience. They're still ordering for things to come to their house. So, their volumes haven't really changed. And so they're getting similar revenue. It might be less money ultimately for retailers, but for them, it's all the same. And they're, those, the Amazons and the DHLs of the world that they fly for, those planes have to go every day as part of their shuttle network. So whether the planes are full or not, Cargojet's going to get paid. So that was an interesting development. And one other thing, we've heard a lot of talk about retail inventories at some of the major retailers like Walmart and Target being, they've had excess inventories, and that kind of hurt their first quarter earnings, and they're sitting on all that excess, those excess SKUs. Cargo just said they think that a lot of that is going to be burned off in the e-commerce market or through secondary channels, and that they'll end up flying those as that they discount that the retailers discount those products and ship them out, and so they'll get business through that indirectly.
And Eric, staying on that theme, this might be kind of an out of left field question for you, but Amazon also reported their earnings yesterday. Great quarter for them, still seeing incredible increases in revenue and net sales. And we know that Amazon is really trying to play hard into their air cargo and their Amazon Prime Air and everything about their aspect too. Do you think that now they'll have some really strong tailwinds going into the back half of 2022 with this to really kind of beef up their air cargo side of things?
Well, we know that, Amazon Air is just, every quarter is growing, their fleet, and also growing into smaller regional airports or gateways where they can, have service, to reach different parts of the country quicker. So I haven't seen the latest numbers, but, I haven't seen anything recently, any announcements, but I'm sure, by the end of the third quarter and the end of the year, we'll have seen that their fleet is, topped up by a few planes, probably 737-800s or 767s. And, I think last time I saw, they were approaching close to 100 aircraft for the fleet. So, that'll definitely be happening to keep up with all the e-commerce business.
Awesome, Eric. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. As we look forward to next week, I know we just jumped into all the news items and things that you just posted as of this morning, but are there any topics or anything that you're going to be looking towards?
Well, I might do a roundup of the passenger airlines, kind of their earnings. I've only covered a few of them so far, so we'll probably just take a look at how they've done as far as their cargo divisions and who did the best coming out of earnings season.
All right, Eric, well, thank you for joining us this morning. Great to have you as always. We'll talk to you again soon. Right now, we're going to head over to Sydney Edwards. She's going to look at what's making news on freightwaves.com this morning.